Here we are again with Helen Schumann, and we're talking about stories from her past. And we've been kind of going through the times in Nevada and the times when you were a child, and we've gone through your dad. And so let's talk about your mom. Tell us all about your mom. That's an amazing woman that went all the way out on the boondocks, all the way from Germany to go to Mormonville, and that's a big change.
Oh, particularly topography-wise, where she was raised, it's in Germany, it's the land of the heather. And they used to go out all the time and pick it. It's like looking at a grain field, only you see all of this beautiful pink heather blowing in the breeze a little bit. And they had lots of forests. And one of her favorite memories that she used to relate to us would be going into the forests to gather mushrooms. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just trying to picture how that'd be going through the sagebrush and gathering mushrooms.
It would definitely be different, wouldn't
Yes,
it? Yeah.
probably mushrooms not to eat, actually.
Right, exactly.
Well, then maybe again. No, never mind.
Yeah, but you think of her bravery and her courage to kind of, after World War I, to leave Germany before World War II, come all the way across in a boat and come all the way to Utah, which is a very different climate. Germany is so humid, and this is not humid. It's a kind of a sagebrushy, high altitude desert. And so she was a brave woman. So what are your fondest memories about your mom?
Her love for my dad. She was a pretty woman, and there were men that would look at her a couple of times, and until they saw daddy saddling up to her side, then they would quickly look away. But mama was always well dressed, and even in the ranch, she always was neatly pressed, always clean clothes, very tidy, and with herself personally. And she had the thickest brown hair. It was so pretty, and it had a natural wave to it. And I always admired how thick and dark her hair was. And I was always a little bit in wonder why I didn't look anything like her. Um, in any way. She was smaller than I was. Her face and her neck and her eyes were a different color. Hair was a different color. We spoke differently. Though in Germany, she excelled in her class apparently, and you go to regular school until you're 14, and then you take a test to see if you're smart enough to go on to college, or if you would do better with a trade of some sort. They still do that apparently. And I think that's very wise. I wish they did that here in the US. I think that would solve so many of the educational problems first off, and certainly make happier students, happier people.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly more prepared to work in the work field, in the workforce, than how they're doing it now. And I think a lot of people get lost, and a lot of kids go to college when they have no business being there.
Mm-hmm.
First, don't have the aptitude.
Mm-hmm.
And secondly, they recognize that and don't want to go. They don't want to feel a failure.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, enough of that. My mother was very smart, and she could have gone on to another school. But if I remember correctly, her family didn't have the funds to move her on. But she became a dental assistant after, I don't know if she started when she was 14. I don't know exactly what happened in that time frame, but she was doing that when Daddy came to get her. She did take English classes, so she could speak a little English, and she always maintained a bit of an accent, but people could never figure out exactly where she was from because the way she spoke, it wasn't that guttural German harsh accent that a lot of uh, Germans have when they come to America. And she was very smart, very, very smart. Uh, Clever isn't quite the word, though clever fits sometimes, but smart is better.
Mhm.
And she loved to read. And one thing that she always looked forward to in getting the Reader's Digest was taking the word power test. And she would very rarely miss a word. And she never cheated.
Yeah. Well, I look at her and I marvel at her because, oh my God, how many children did she have?
8.
8 children on a ranch in Nevada. The clothes, getting the clothes, sewing the clothes. I mean, she must have sewn, right?
And she didn't know how until she taught herself
Wow.
with a treadle machine, which I won 3 state sewing contests with.
Yay! Yay! Absolutely. Well, and you just think of the logistics as a woman, the food and the garden. I mean, didn't you have a huge home garden, right?
Yeah, but she didn't go out and do that. Daddy planted it, and us kids weeded it. We actually had 2 gardens.
And she cooked it.
She cooked it. And she almost didn't know how to even boil water when she got married.
Wow.
In fact, there's a family story about Mama learning to cook. She saw a recipe with grape nuts in it, and she didn't have any grape nuts. So she used walnuts instead, not knowing that grape nuts was a cereal. So she made this loaf of bread, cake, and Daddy ate it, and he complimented her on it and said it tasted wonderful. And Mama said, well, we don't have any grape nuts, so I used walnuts. By the way, what are grape nuts? And Daddy told her that it was cereal. And he wouldn't believe that she had done the switch. And so she had to get the recipe to show him. And it's a family favorite recipe.
She's obviously a creative woman too.
Yes, yes, she is. Yeah, she sewed a lot. When us kids would go to bed, she would pull out the fabric and cut the pattern out and sew. And she made, I remember particularly, she made a dress for Venna and I that was the same pattern. And mine was red and Venna's was blue linen. And both of them were linen, but mine, the colors were different. Had a little 2 pleats over the breast area, and it seems like there were 2 pleats in the skirt, and it was a either pleated or gathered skirt. I can't remember, but had fitted sleeves. It was a little bit tricky, and she sewed beautifully. I mean, Mama never did anything that I remember that was ever a failure in anything, in cooking, in sewing, in maintaining the house. I never remember her saying, whoops. No. And people always thought that we had more money than what we had just by the way she dressed all of us. That made a real difference. People always, and also if they ever came to our home, they thought we were well-to-do because of her taste with the furnishings and also the placement of it. And she made the draperies for the living room, I remember really well. And every furniture that she had lasted forever. And because us kids had to, take our shoes off and not wear dirty clothes onto the furniture, and she bought nice things. She'd rather wait and get nice things rather than cheaply made, and doesn't cost very much. One of my memories, in fact, of furniture is there was one furniture store in Elko, and it was in fall time, because I remember it being chilly and it got dark early. And there was Venna and Dallas and I don't know where the twins were. Maybe they weren't born yet, actually. Anyway, we went to the furniture store, and Mom and Daddy were looking for a sofa and a chair and a table. And she was looking for furniture for the front room or the parlor in the earlier days, because the house had 2 sliding doors that would open and shut together. And us kids loved them. We thought they were fabulous. And my mother didn't have, for some reason, a very fond usage, and she always wanted to leave it open. And us kids loved to keep them closed. It was amazing to open and close those doors. We felt we were in a palace, But so the furniture was for the living room. And Daddy and she looked around, and Mr. Stinson, I believe, came to help him. And we were there a long time, and us kids got bored sitting being good, so we started playing hide and seek amongst the furniture. Remember that? And she got a green avocado kind of green frisee sofa with a matching armchair. And in addition, the ranch must have been doing well. She got 2 rockers, 2 mahogany rockers, and one sister has one of them and another sister has the other, and a lovely lamp to go on the mahogany round drum table. And that was the furniture in the living room, plus a piano. And it was very comfortable. And during the summertime, we always had fresh flowers. Oh, that's another story. In the old house, someone had planted years and years ago a row of goldenrod, and they were death to my mother and hay fever.
Oh dear.
If she got within 20 feet of them, her eyes would swell up and she would sneeze and she couldn't breathe. And it was just awful. Well, I didn't seem to remember that or know that. And so one day I picked a big handful to bring into my mother, because I've watched my father bring flowers to her and how happy she was. And so I thought that I'd make her happy.
Oops.
Wrong, big whoops. Oh, and I felt so badly, because the first thing she said was, "Helen, get out of here, go away," And I was trying to be a good doobie and make my mommy happy, and it was anything but. And anything Mom wanted to do, she pretty much did. She was very feminine. She didn't enjoy the outside very much. I only saw her on a horse once.
Oh, wow.
She did not enjoy horseback riding. Wow. And the only time she got on a horse, I don't remember her even talking about it, if she did any riding in Tremont or at the dry farms. I would think not, because they would only have workhorses at that point. So probably the only time would be in Nevada. And Daddy put her on in the yard, house yard, he put her on our safest, most gentle horse called Prince. And it was Daddy's other favorite horse before he got Fellow. Prince was really a prince of a horse. He could put all 8 of us kids on it and we'd have no problem. It was a beautiful horse too. He's a sorrel with a pretty white face and 4 white stockings. He was a lovely horse. He really was. But Mama would only go around the house and get off again, and Daddy would have loved to have her enjoy riding and go with him down the meadows and stuff like that. But she just didn't ever feel comfortable about doing that. She was definitely a city girl. I think one of the places, well, Oma had pretty good taste. Um, Not bourgeois for sure, but good taste in placing things and whatever. And of course, Oma never had the money because having 5 children or 6 kids, she had 6 kids in Europe and Germany was not heard of, that you didn't have big families. And then with Opa and his on again, off again work, because as I understand, if he didn't like his clients, he just told them buzz off, I guess. And so they had money sometimes and sometimes they didn't. But she had an aunt and an uncle who didn't have children and they lived in Hamburg. And they loved Mama. And they would come and get her on the train and take her back to Hamburg. And she would spend the summer there. And they would dress her in the latest of fashions for kids. And that always hurt Ingrid, her sister, because she had red hair and freckles and wasn't as pretty of a child. She was a cute little girl when you look at her pictures, but Mama was the standout. And his aunt and uncle liked to be seen with her because people would stop and comment. And especially the way they dressed her in the latest, greatest. And so Ingrid would get to wear those clothes after Mama grew out of them, but they weren't ever hers.
Right.
I kind of understand that feeling because I was bigger than my age. And so I got to wear Venna's and Celia's clothes, and people would say to me, "Oh, Helen, you look so pretty in Venna's or Celia's dress," and I would go, "I'd like a dress of my own." Each of us would get a dress at Easter time. And I had a nice wardrobe because the girls took good care of the clothes. We all did. And they were almost like new when I got them. They were in such good condition. And Mama made sure that we bought good clothes or that we looked very nice. And people would comment to her about how nice her family looks. And that was important to her, the appearances. And coming to America at that time was really hard for her too, because there was so much anti-German feelings, as you can imagine. And Grandma was not happy about Daddy bringing home a German girl. She had a local girl picked out for Daddy. And Daddy, I don't think even dated her, but were friends with her. I don't know if they were the same class or what, but nothing existed except for little Marlena.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, now I know that your mom didn't, know how to cook when she got here, but she clearly, after 8 kids, learned how to cook. I always think mothers are the thing you remember about your mother is her cooking. So what do you remember that's like your favorite thing that your mother cooked? It's like, because I know my mother does pot roast, and nobody does a pot roast like my mother. It's like, so when I go home, she goes, "What do you want?" I go, "Pot roast," right? Because so with your mom, what was the thing that you remember about her?
German potato pancakes.
Wow.
Nobody makes them like Mama did. And of course, we had to have the homemade applesauce. That's another thing. We would bottle pears, cherries, peaches, apricots, apples, applesauce. I mean, in 2-quart jars, we would have like 100 bottles each.
Wow.
Hundreds.
Now, did you have those trees on your property? Or did
We
you
had
buy
the apple
You had
tree
the apple tree.
and we had a pear tree. But Daddy would, and Mama, oh, and tomatoes, we would have to put up tomatoes. Yeah, we'd go into the pantry. It was a room, as you can imagine, with shelves of all this food. And yeah, we never starved, but we worked our fannies off to bottle them all.
I can imagine. Yeah.
So, but it was real gratifying to walk into that room and see all that beautiful food that was available to us. So we weren't going to starve anytime soon, especially with the meat running around.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
You wanted a steak, just go out to the meadow and slice off a hind end,
So did you have a meat room like this or did you have a big gigantic freezer, or because did you have ice chests? I mean, like,
No, the ice chests weren't around yet. However, we had an ice house on the ranch, which was really interesting, though. The ice, we didn't use it other than for a shed for the cattle. But this is what they did in the olden days. The ice house was right next to one of the creeks, or cricks, as Nevadans say, cricks. And when it froze, they would cut out big chunks of the ice, like a slice of bread, kind of, if you can envision that. And they would bring it into the ice house and put it on a bed of straw. And they would get a bunch of them for the first layer. And then when that froze over, they would go back in and cut another great big bunch of slabs of ice and keep stacking that straw, ice, straw, ice, straw, ice. So you would have ice way into the summer because it would keep itself cold, with the ice. And so, but we didn't use that. By then we had freezers and refrigerator and stuff like that.
But you had these big chunks of meat, like you said in the other video that you went into Elko, and you had the big places where you had your meat hanging, and then they would slice it. But you probably had a ton of meat right there, right, on the ranch.
Right, but we stored the majority of the meat in Elko because that's where it was cut, and they had these big storage freezers to put it on. And actually, freezers didn't come in, the chest type freezers didn't come until later, quite a bit later.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. So I was thinking, like, wow, your mother had to get no wonder you said she had her list of the meat that she wanted you to bring, because she had to plan everything out, like in a lot of detail. Now, she had her pantry with all of the canned things, but the meat would have to come in and you'd go in and out. So,
right.
Yeah. And Elko was a ways away. I
mean, 75 miles.
Yeah.
But for being raised in Nevada, that was nothing. That was short. Not very far away.
Well, and you were saying earlier about that the house did your dad build that house, or was that house that was there when you got it?
We were, I believe, only the second owners of that property. The Steeles owned it, and Steeles at one time had been a very prominent family in Nevada. In fact, Steels and Weeks were somehow related through marriage. And I get confused because I remember a name of Seneca Weeks, and he was like a senator in Nevada, and he had some interest in the ranch, as did the Steels. And I'll have to ask Dallas, my older brother, who owned it, if it was the Weeks or the Steels.
So the
But
house was there when you guys got there. Did your dad add on to it, or it was already built, but it had no insulation? What was it like in the winter?
colder than the Wilders behind. Whoa. And I had tons of blankets, and the family always teased me. And I also, every night I could, snitched the hot water bottle and put it in bed before I got undressed. And boy, when you got undressed, you did it major fast.
Whoa.
In the family reunion, Zena tells a story about we used to share the bedroom together. She had a twin bed, as well did I. And there was a little nightstand that separated us. And the dresser was on my side of the bed. And she used to get upset with me because when it was time for us to get up, all I had to do was just pull the bedspread up and plump the pillow and cover it. And Vanna, she was like a tornado in her bed. She had to almost remake her bed every morning because she was tossing and turning all the time. And I didn't dare move because if I did, it was to a cold spot. So I stayed put. And that frustrated her. She just thought that was not right. So one day she got a cotton string, and it was like this, and she put it under my undersheet so you couldn't see it. And she made it long enough so that it went over the top of my bed, down on the floor so I wouldn't see it, and on up to her bed. So, time for us to go to bed, and we get undressed into our jammies, flannel jammies, by the way, into our bed, and the light switch, which was overhead, we didn't have a lamp in the bedroom. I had to, oh, that reminds me too of another story. Anyway, I'd have to hop out of bed and go over and turn the lights off. And by the way, it wasn't a light switch, it was buttons. And everybody thought that was amazing that we would have buttons. You know, it's just a fancy house. It was a fancy house for a ranch house. It was in its day. It really was. There was gold and green wallpaper, and it was a nice, nice house. It still was when we moved in, and it was even when we moved out. Anyway, we're sleeping, except for Vanna. I was just barely asleep, and I felt something under my sheet. I know I did. Felt like a snake. Scared the hell out of me. I jumped out of bed and threw the covers back and couldn't see anything. And so I called, and I had turned the light on. And so I turned the light off, climbed back into bed, getting my spot warm again. And damned if I didn't feel that again. This time it was a major jerk. And I flew out of bed because this wasn't dreaming. And I tore that bed apart. I mean, totally apart. And she had enough time to hurry and wrap that up. And she was laughing hysterically. So I knew she had been up, she was somehow responsible for whatever that was in my bed. And she just thought that was the best thing. She really got me. We were always doing something like that to each other to tease each other.
Mm-hmm.
And Mama would get in the middle of it sometimes because Celia, our oldest sister, had this incredible fear of frogs. She would just go berserk. We couldn't believe it. I mean, it was the damnedest show we've ever seen. And between the old house and the new house was one of these creeks that would come down. And there's one spot in the creek where it kind of spread out. So it was real swampy kind of thing. And the frogs loved it there. And we could always find a wonderful specimen of a frog there. And we would catch one and we would put it in different places at different times for Celia's enjoyment. We'd put it in her pajama top pocket, or we'd put it in her shoe, or we'd put it under her pillow, and we'd wait. And it didn't take very long when we would hear this panic, frantic, unearthly scream. We just couldn't imagine anyone acting like that, especially our older sister, who was the example for all of us, you know. None of us could ever, we still don't understand that. But she would call out to Mama, Mama, do something. Oh, these terrible kids. And we'd be going, and then we went through a phase of short sheeting each other's beds. Have you ever been short sheeted? Yeah, then you know.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was a biggie. And that was miserable when it was colder than cold.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you climb, you're tired and you're thinking of going to sleep and you're in a hurry to get out of the cold. Can't get your foot down. Or we would sew a pajama bottom up, so you put your pajama on and your foot wouldn't go through. Or a sleeve, you know. And sometimes we'd forget, like sometimes I would sew up a shirt or a sleeve or something, and so they wouldn't wear it for a couple of days or so. And we were always in a hurry to get ready so we wouldn't miss the school bus. And to try to wear that shirt, couldn't get your arm through. Oh dear. Oh, and Dallas did something. Mama always made wonderful bread. And she'd time it so that it would be coming out of the oven the time that we get off the school bus. And so we'd come into the house smelling that wonderful fresh bread smell. And we had homemade butter that we would churn. And that's another thing I would separate the milk from the cream, and that was a bitch to clean. Oh, geez. It had over 50 cylinders that separated the milk from the cream.
Oh, wow.
And you had to clean that by hand. We didn't have Yes, Daddy had dishwashers. And we complained as girls in one ear and out the other. No, Daddy had 5 of them. So we'd come home and we'd get a slice of fresh, thick bread and homemade ice cream, butter, and always homemade jam or honey. We had a beehive at the ranch, and Daddy would get the honey for us, and that was fun to watch him do. He'd have had a special hat that had a screen around
Mhm.
it. And then he just wore long sleeve shirts and
Did he get stung much?
never got stung.
Wow.
And he would have a smoker, and I had one, and I have no idea what happened to it, but it looked like a little tiny bellows,
Mhm.
and it was like a box, and
Mhm.
then you would push it like this,
Mhm.
and it had a little funnel kind of look on
Mhm.
the top,
Mhm.
and you put in bark of a tree or dry grass or
Oh,
something,
wow.
and you would light that and then get it to smoke, and you put it around the beehive, and the bees would not like that and want to go away. So that's what Daddy used to get
Wow.
in there. And
Wow.
yeah, that's amazing to watch, to pull up these huge columns of beeswax. Us
Wow.
kids used to love to chew on the wax because of the honey,
Oh,
but it got pretty nasty after the taste was gone.
yeah. Yeah. Right. Right. Did you make your own candles or anything from the
No, we didn't
beeswax?
do that.
Yeah.
But we did have kerosene lamps before we got our own generator.
Oh,
We were the first in the valley to get the generator.
wow.
It was Daddy put it in the back porch, and uh, I think you'd have to crank it to get it started, and it would run for hours to power up some batteries,
Oh, wow.
and then we had to be very judicious in terms of what power to use because those batteries didn't hold their charge very long.
Not back in the old days, no.
Mm-mm.
Mm-mm.
But we had light for a while. But first, we had just kerosene lamps at night.
Mm.
And oh, they were a bitch to clean.
Mm.
That soot from
Mhm.
the wick
Mhm.
would always get so dirty, and
Mhm.
we'd use like newspaper to clean them. And
Mhm.
then first to get the soot off the cylinder, the glass cylinder, and then you'd have to wash them, and you'd never get all of the soot off until you get on your hands. And you had to be so careful because that glass was so thin
Yeah.
on it.
Mhm.
And then they had, after a while, I remember getting some, they still have them, I believe. They had looked like little socks inside them,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and you pumped it,
Right.
and
Right.
I think it was with kerosene,
Mhm.
and they would stay uh, lit quite a while
Right.
actually, and they made a little hissing noise.
Mhm.
Yeah, they used them for campers, or campers used them
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah.
We had that. Mama didn't like it because if I remember right, it left an odor too, didn't it?
Yeah, I think
Kind of a
so.
gassy
Mhm.
smell.
Mhm.
Yeah, Mom didn't like that.
Mhm.
But um,
What do you think was her favorite thing about living on the ranch?
Hiram,
That's a nice, simple answer. Yeah.
that's
Mhm.
the only reason why she's there. She did not like ranch life. She was a city girl.
Wow.
And uh, as soon as she could, when Reed, the youngest of the family, turned 18, she was in town.
Wow.
And she missed the opera and the symphony and the
Oh, wow.
ballet,
Oh, so
and
she was a real arts person. Wow, that's neat.
really an art appreciator.
Mhm.
She read a lot. She loved to read books.
Mhm.
Didn't have much time
Mhm.
because even after us kids went to bed, there are always things to do.
Mhm.
And like in those days, you didn't throw a pair of socks away, you darned them.
Right.
And us kids, especially Dallas and I, were always ripping shirts or pants. And
Because you were outside a lot. Mhm.
so she was mending. Grandma Schumann was really good at that. I can remember when I was learning to sew, I would sit in the pantry. That's where the pedal machine, sewing machine was. Karen has that now. But oh, the clothes I sewed on that.
Mm.
Gad, closets full of clothes, just
Wow.
closets. Anyway, Grandma would come in, Grandma Schumann would come in, and she'd sit on the flour barrel beside me. And we always had a basket full of socks that needed mending. And we had a mending egg. Do you
I
remember what
remember
those
those.
look like?
Yeah.
And Grandma would get that, and she'd get the special darning thread, and she'd pull out one sock after another and darn, actually weave, in and out, in and out. She was a master at that.
Wow.
I still have some pillowcases that she made for me.
Wow.
I've never used them because I thought they were such treasures. And she gave me one pillowcase. I was 14 years old for my birthday. I still have it.
Wow.
It's a girl, like a princess with a big skirt and a bonnet. I'll have to show it to you. It's a kick. But
Cool.
she did beautiful handwork. Grandma Schumann did.
Wow.
Really did. And Mama did too. I don't remember her learning it in Germany. I think she learned that here in America.
Wow.
And Mama got excellent at it. It was just time.
Yeah.
That she didn't have much with everybody running in and out.
Yeah.
And washing. I remember at the old house, in the back porch, we had two huge porcelain sinks. Actually, it was one sink, but it had two divisions to it. That brings up another story. Every spring, when the snow melted, there would be big, huge puddles around the ranch. And little tadpoles would show up. Thousands of them.
Oh, wow.
Thousands. And the big thing would be, especially Venna and I, would go out with our 2-quart jars and fill it with tadpoles. And our deal was to change the water every day on them, because pretty soon they'd lose their little tails and be hopping around. And that's time to get them out of the water and put them in the garden. Well, it was my turn one day to clean the 2-quart bottle. I did that just fine, put the water in, and they all died. I used hot water.
Oh, oops. Yeah.
I felt terrible. Oh, all these little black bodies. Oh, I felt so sad. I was a murderer.
Oh, dear.
Oh, because they were so cute, and they were not easy to catch. Those little buggers swim fast.
They do. Yeah.
And we didn't have any nets or anything. We did this by hand. That was catching by hand. That was one of our entertainment things in the spring. And we'd have to, I remember doing this down in the flats. So we'd bring them up with a tractor or carry it with a horse, and so, but yeah, that was not a nice experience.
So what's the funniest thing you remember about your mom? Like sometimes she really laughed and just really thought something was really funny. The reason I ask is just because I lived in Germany, and I know the Germans can be very serious. They're very stoic. So,
she loved good music, so we listened to opera an awful lot in the house. Loved ballet, and she loved highbrow music. And so as kids grew up with that, hearing that music play, we had a phonograph player that you'd have to move the needle on and off. It was before the big switch In fact, the first thing that we ever saw that had a switch on it were the jukeboxes that came out in the 50s. I remember first seeing the first jukebox. We were all fascinated about how the records would come out of nowhere, and the needle would come, and then you put your nickel in.
Yeah.
But and these records were, I don't know what they were made of, but they broke really easily. You had to be real careful with them.
Yeah.
They were not bendable, very breakable.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the singers that I loved, his name was Mario Lanza, and he was a tenor, and Caruso was his competition. And Mario never got the acknowledgement because people would love him, and the lovers of Caruso would really downplay Mario Lanza. He didn't have the voice or the stamina or da 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 da. There was this competition going on, and there was a show called The Student Prince, and he acted and sang in it. Mario did, and I fell in love with him. He was my first crush. Mama laughed. She would love funny things that would happen. And jokes. She would laugh at jokes. She didn't like off-color jokes. That was not good. What would Mama laugh at?
Or what was the funniest thing you ever saw her do? She was German. She was German.
Yeah, that's what makes it so
hard. Yeah, no, I that's why I thought it was an interesting question, because
I don't have an answer.
Well, I mean, I'm raised, my family's German too, so I just thought it was, my family could be very serious.
Yeah. Well, Mama would laugh, but golly, the only thing that I could come up with is that she was pretty damn well perfect.
Oh, well, there you go. Yeah.
I can't remember her telling a joke, and I can't remember her doing anything that made us laugh, like something she did that was funny. I'll give that some thought.
Yeah.
Boy, that's an interesting question. But the same for my father, actually.
Yeah.
I just remember us working our ass off.
Yeah.
We really did.
Well, working on a ranch would do it, for sure.
Yeah. And private moments were rare.
Oh, I bet. With 8 kids, I can imagine.
Yeah. And Mama didn't have the automatic washer.
Right.
You know, we had a washer that was the latest and greatest. It had a wringer attached to it. And you would and we would be in the back porch, and she'd hook it to the faucet from these double sinks, of which she's already been soaking some of the dirty, dirty clothes for overnight in. And she'd rinse them out, and then first she'd do the whites. And she would use bleach and what they call bluing.
I
remember that?
I do.
And so she'd wash the whites first, but she would have to wring the clothes out after every cycle, and then empty the washer and put in fresh water to rinse them, and then wring them out again.
Yep.
And then, because it was before all of these no iron clothes, so shirts and dresses and pillowcases and drapery, anything cotton or linen got ironed.
Right.
And so that was another cycle.
Yes.
But not in the washer. The starch would get out a big old dishpan kind of size, and the starch was liquid, and you would put so much of it in, and then a little bit of water,
Mhm.
and then you'd put the dry clothes. And I never figured that out. Why do you dry them first? But we would dry the clothes on the clothesline with the clothespins,
Mhm.
let them dry, and then we bring the iron clothes, well, all the clothes in, but the iron clothes would go into another pile, and we would put them into the dishpan, get them all wet with this starch, and then roll them up really tight and put them in the bushel basket that had a lining, a plastic lining in, and I guess kind of let them marinate for a day or two, but no longer because of mold and discoloration coming in. And we always had a bushel basket of ironing.
Wow.
So we all got that job too.
Right.
But by then, thankfully, when us girls were old enough to iron, we now had electric irons,
Mhm.
but we had to wait to see if the batteries were charged
To do it.
to do it. Yeah.
Mhm.
So that all took careful timing
Uh-huh. Mhm.
to do. Shirts. Oh, and ironing took forever to do.
Mhm.
I can remember late at night ironing.
Yeah.
So, and we did that in the pantry too.
Right.
Once in a while in the kitchen.
Mhm.
Yeah. So,
So,
yeah,
any other things you can think of about your mom you want to share?
I was always proud of Mama and the way she looked.
Mhm.
As I mentioned, she was impeccable in her dressing, even while at the ranch. Uh, when she first came, women still were not really allowed to wear pants,
Mhm.
even if you were outside working.
Mhm.
Golly, I think I remember her wearing aprons with her house dress, but her house dress was always a nice dress, not a church going meeting dress, but a nice cotton dress of some sort that needed ironing.
Yeah. Yeah.
As well her aprons.
Mhm.
Yeah, Mama, if she wanted to do something, she learned how to do it
Mhm.
and do it well. And she had the most beautiful handwriting, and she knew how to do calligraphy beautifully. She took that in school, and one thing she learned. And people who wanted nice documents written in a beautiful calligraphic
Mhm.
hand, Mama would do that,
Wow.
and beautiful.
Wow.
And she had different sizes of pens to get the different looks.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, she had a very steady hand. And gosh, it'd be fun to have something of hers that was she had written. It was really pretty. She did that. Yeah, I never had to apologize for my mother on anything.
Yeah.
Except she was mean to me sometimes.
As all mothers are.
Yes, that's
all
true.
mothers are. Yeah.
Well, as my mother needed to be
Yeah.
with me particularly.
Well, because clearly you were the tomboy and she
Yes.
was a very feminine female, so it's like, yeah.
Yeah, I can remember Mama saying to me time after time, Helen, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Helen would.
Yeah.
All the more.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, you clearly took after your dad on a lot of levels with the outdoorsy things, and you look more like him too,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
your whole stature and everything was more
Yeah,
like him.
people were amazed actually when I introduced her as my mother.
Because she was a tiny little thing, by comparison.
Yeah, and that dark hair and dark brown eyes and smaller.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did not look like my mama.
Yeah, that's cool.
I remember once my birthday was coming up, and at that time we were in grammar school, and I was getting aware of what other people were doing, what other girls were doing. And there was this spat of birthday parties going around. And that's one thing that Mama was uncomfortable with, was having to draw attention to herself, like birthday parties. You know, they were in a way kind of competing because what did you do at the birthday party kind of stuff. Well, we celebrated within the family, but I wanted a birthday party with my girlfriends. Well, Mama didn't quite know how to do that and didn't want to do it. But I wouldn't be quiet. I wanted a birthday party. And so finally she agreed, and I could invite 4 or 5 friends. And we went to the Wagon Wheel, which at that time was the nicest restaurant in Wells, which was adjacent to a casino. You know, the big wide door was just right there, and you could hear the slots and the gambling going on. But nonetheless, we went to the Wagon Wheel, and we were able to each order a hamburger and French fries. And she brought the birthday cake that she made. And angel food cake was my favorite cake. She made an angel food cake, and it had white frosting on it. And I don't know where maybe the ranch was. Anyway, she put the angel food cake was made in a tube pan. And she used the inside. She put a vase in the inside where the tube was, and had fresh tulips coming out. So there was this pretty white cake. Oh, and she had put coconut on top of the frosting. And then with these tulips inside for the decoration, was really very pretty and highly unusual. And the girls my guests were quite impressed by that.
There we go. Good.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah, that was very nice of her to do that. And she stepped out of her comfort zone in doing that.
She clearly spent a life stepping out of her comfort zone. We have to give her points for that.
Oh, is that ever the truth? Yeah.
Yeah.
But she never acted uncomfortable. You know, people never knew she was comfortable.
Right. So
I do remember, though, one of my contests that I won, one of the sewing contests, I can tell you exactly. It was the first Make It Yourself with Wool contest, and it was at the county level. And one of the mothers of one of the gals that I was competing against came up to Mama after the contest and that I had won. And the lady said, "Oh, you must be so proud of Helen." And Mama always kind of shrugged that off. And it always hurt me because I really wanted to be like her. I wanted her approval, you know. And I never got that. Helen, I'm really proud of you. And
it's that stoic German nature, you know.
Yeah.
It's that stoic, like you don't look for attention almost, you know. I mean, I understand my family has that German side too.
Yeah. And growing up in children at that time were to be seen and not heard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Well, we had all this country to grow up on, Yahoo and yell.
Yeah, exactly.
Which was heard us.
Yeah. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Okay, well, we'll close for this one.
Okay.